This is Nitya Ramachandra from the NRR Sports Show. This is episode 937, alongside with one of our co-hosts, Kia Lyons, and our friend Tommy Wolf from Lit Media Productions. He does a great job over there. Go check his page out. He takes a lot of great photos. And now we're joined by a true legend. His name is Seneca Wallace. He's a former NFL quarterback. He played for Iowa State in college. He also played for the Seahawks, Browns, Saints, 49ers, Packers, and used to be a coach for the Dallas Cowboys. And now he's coaching high school. He owns six Wingstops restaurants, and he does a lot of things in the community. And Seneca, I just want to say thank you for joining the show today. It was truly an honor. Like I said, you're a legend in the game and off the field and on the field. So first of all, truly an honor to have you on the show. How are you and your family doing today?
Me and my family are doing great, man. I'm blessed. Thank you for having me on the show. No problem. I'm new to the whole podcast world. I'm new to the whole social media world, but I'm gradually stepping my foot out into the water. My wife has been really heavy on social media, and she's like, "You got to get on board. You can't get left behind." So appreciate you guys having me on.
No problem.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Seneca.
Yes, Kia. Thank you.
And you're going to be great on social media. I read up that you're a Leo quarterback.
I am.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
And we got another Leo in Nithin, so it's like you'll be great on social
August
media.
birthday right here. Let's go.
Who's all you? You August too?
I'm August, right? Yep.
August what?
16.
Oh, I like it. We got the numbers right. I'm August 6th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So yeah, good Leos. I like it. Good energy.
Yeah. So Seneca, tell us what it's like. What is it like to be you, and what was it growing up being you?
It was different. It was different. I think I was always that person that kind of marched at the beat of his own drum. I kind of always did my own thing. But I was very level-headed. I was very goal set and driven on what I ultimately wanted to be. Did I ultimately think that I was going to be an NFL player? No, but I had dreams that I'd eventually make it somewhere big, and I didn't know to what level. And I didn't really realize my talent level as far as on the football field, probably until I got to college.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm talking because when I graduated high school in '98, I went to Oregon State out of high school, and I wasn't a qualifier. And so with that being said, not being a qualifier, I had to go back to a junior college. And so I had to kind of prove myself in a sense, which everybody knew that I was coming back to the junior college in Sacramento. Head coach knew and everybody else. So, I had to come back and step in and then actually start to prove myself again on, just being able to have the ability to play at a high level, at a different level than high school. And I think once I got to junior college and realized that, my game had elevated even more,
right.
I just knew right then, I had maybe something special,
That's amazing. And it's sometimes those prove moments. What I'm hearing from different Hall of Famers and champions is that it's those proving moments that level us up to even greater, and then really sink in like the greatness that you already are.
Absolutely. I think it's always something that at some point you realize that, hey, in whatever field you're in, I think it's even with me going into franchise development after my post career, you kind of have those moments that kind of that you capitalize on. You actually realize like, dang, all right, I can actually really do this. I can actually translate into franchise development. Oh, I can actually play this game at a high level. Did I ever doubt my skill set per se when I was growing up in high school? No. But I think when you actually get out there, now you're going up to another level and you're playing with other players that somewhat have the same skill set you have, but your skill set is still elevated. That's when you realize like, okay, I got this. Now I got to take my game to another level.
That's incredible. And you're a hotelier. So you have that strategic, you're taking care of so many, which is so awesome. So awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, Tommy, you can go next.
Yeah. So Seneca, big fan of yours, been watching you since I was little. So now take me through your college career. You went to Iowa State. You had the biggest comeback in Iowa State history in 2002 against Iowa, which you don't like the Iowa Hawkeyes sometimes, but take me through that game and take me through what was it like having that big comeback of yours.
That game kind of solidified, kind of my history per se, or my legend in the state of Iowa. Everybody knows in the state of Iowa, there's, you got the Cyclones, you got the Hawkeyes. You're either going to be either one. There's no other sports teams there in the state of Iowa. So the state closed down literally when you got the Cyhawk game going on. And for us, my first year was 9/11. The game got postponed. We ended up beating them, and we played them in the day after Thanksgiving. So we ended up beating them my first year there. And for me, it was kind of understanding the big rivalry, the matchup, and not really knowing what level and how intensified that game was. And so the first time it was a little bit different because, 9/11 happened. So we didn't get to play like we normally would play. We usually play them around week 2 of the season. And so the following year, we ended up playing Florida State in Eddie Robinson Kickoff Classic. We ended up losing at the last second to Florida State, which we should have won, in my opinion, and everybody knows that. But we ended up going to Iowa week 2, or maybe no, we came back, we played somebody else, maybe Tennessee Tech or somebody. Then we go to Iowa. So we're 1-1. Iowa's at the time, they're undefeated, and the hype kind of built up going to Kinnick Stadium, right? And so Iowa had all the big dogs. They had all these potentially first round guys coming off their team. And so they ended up jumping up on us 24-6 or whatever it was at halftime. And I should know the score, but I don't remember. And we ended up coming back and scoring 31 some odd points in the second half to beat them. Now, everybody says, and they always talk about how the University of Iowa, that team in 2002, was probably the best team assembled that they had in the history of Iowa. They could have probably went on and played a national championship game, but they lost to us. So every time I go back to the state of Iowa, people love to always talk about that game. They always say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm a Hawkeye. But I say at the end of the day, I never lost to Iowa. So you could be a Hawkeye fan all you want, but my legend and my name and my back on my jersey says otherwise. I never lost to you guys. It doesn't matter to me. You could be a Hawkeye fan all you want. So it was a little bit, it was a fun game. I mean, it was a very memorable game. I still have a picture here up on my wall that was on the picture of it was on the cover of USA Today on the sports page. And it was a great game. And I love to be part of that, of the history.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome. You gave him a show.
Yeah. So before we go any further, everyone please tune in. We are live on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Spreaker. So please tune in. Everybody can send in stuff, questions, or whatever. Please tune in. This is a great interview right now. So I want to ask you. Obviously, you tell our fans. Obviously, you said you didn't recognize your talent till college. So what were some of the things that you had to do when you got into college to prove that you can be an NFL quarterback? And what was your training routine, or what did you do from what advice did you get from the coaching staff that made you become this great quarterback that you are?
Well, there's different levels to it. I mean, I think as you kind of grow into a quarterback, there's different levels that you actually kind of identify where you have to kind of change the trajectory of your game. And obviously in junior college, it was a lot different. When I went to junior college, the first 6 games, I didn't even start at quarterback. I was a receiver.
Oh, that was my question.
So,
okay.
Yeah, because when I first got to junior college, and the way junior college works, most people know this, is if you got a guy, you're only 2 years at a junior college, right? And you got a guy that maybe started the year before, was pretty successful. They're going to give that guy the opportunity to be the quarterback or the starter, whatever position they're playing the following year, because they're here to try to get a scholarship to go to a D1. And so the guy that was in front of me, his name was Kevin Laird, had a pretty decent season the year before. And so in that same year, in 1998, I found out my mom had cancer.
Oh, wow.
So I really wasn't sure if I was even going to play. So even when I came back, I'd missed the whole 98 season, and I came back and I joined the team in the spring. I was still kind of in and out, wasn't sure if I was going to play or not. And then the head coach there said, we had a great talk. I had a great talk with my mom. She told me to just continue to keep playing ball. Things were going to be fine. And so I just went out and said, all right, look, we'll put you at receiver. You'll start at receiver. You'll be our short yardage quarterback.
Right.
Goal line and short yardage quarterback. And so I went in and did that. Laird played, I think, the first 4 games, broke his wrist, and then after that, I took over, and the rest was history.
Wow.
And so, yeah, but I think there's different times throughout your development and anything that you do throughout your, if you're a development, again, I keep going back to franchise development, there's a process of each step that you're actually going to learn something different. You're going to have to elevate your game. And for me, throughout that process, at the skill set level that I had coming out of high school, going into junior college, I was just using my athletic ability.
Mm-hmm.
Did I use my brain up here to beat other teams? No. I mean, I was just playing sure off ability. And so at that time, my ability kind of helped me get scholarships to Iowa State or scholarship offer to Iowa State or a scholarship offer to Kansas State, just my sure ability. But then when I got to college, I still had my ability, but I had to develop this up top.
Yeah.
And once I developed my mental game, as far as just understanding the physicality that you have to play with, the mental fortitude that you got to go through, as far as, being hit and having to get back up. Yeah, the game is physical at junior college, but it's just a little hair different than it is in high school. Right. But then when you get transferred into the Big 12 and you're playing against the Nebraskas, the mental fortitude that you have to have going on the road to beat a team like Iowa on the road is huge, because you're playing in front of 80,000 people. And so from that standpoint, my mental capacity had to change a little bit, just from understanding not how to play the game per se, because I was still relying on my athletic ability in college. It was just understanding having to go on the road, the different challenges that you got to go through, somewhat how to prepare from week to week, right? But then when I got to the NFL, that's when I had to understand how to really study. Mm-hmm. That's when I really had to understand a playbook, really have to understand the X's and O's of the game, because that's the way you're going to stay in the league for a long time, is understanding the game of football at this level. And so there was always levels to it. And obviously, yes, I had to work on my physical at the same time, but the mental part of it that you had to build was huge once I got to the NFL.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that you would bring that up, because that was my next question for you. I feel like one of the greatest things I see as your persona of who you are is a strategic mindset. So it's really interesting that you would take it from that junior college to college and just be on pure ability. But going through something as emotional and personal as your mom going through cancer, I can only imagine that it takes serious strategic mindset just to compartmentalize and show up and get back up. So what do you feel were the keys to your developing that mindset, like throughout all your years?
Right. I think it was probably my faith, first and foremost. And I think also it was the fact that with my mom, when I looked at my mom and knowing that she was going through what she was going through with multiple myeloma, she was ultimately my driving force on me just getting up and playing each and every day. When you see somebody that has to go through the amount of pain from chemo, the transition from maybe not having hair or having hair to not having hair, and just the physical stuff that they got to go through, it made what I was going through a lot easier. To see my mom getting up each and every day and to continue on with her life, not knowing how much longer that she had to live, it made my driving force and what I did stepping on the football field a lot easier, because I just knew that, one, God had her, God had me, and two, I knew that if my mom had the strength to do what she was doing, there shouldn't be any complaining on the behalf of if I had to go out and run half gassers, or I had to go out and play in a game which the elements weren't perfect. So mentally, I kind of blocked out all that noise and focused in on the task at hand each and every day. And the task was for me to one, get a degree from Iowa State, two, give the best of me on the football field each and every day, and ultimately see where that lands me. Did I know it was going to land me in the NFL? No. I mean, because obviously back then, the NFL was a little bit different, right, than what it looks like today, when I talk about from a standpoint of an undersized Black quarterback. And so it wasn't as if, my big goal was, hey, I'm going to make it to the NFL. I just allowed my skill set on the football field to talk for itself. And then if it allowed me to play at the next level, then it did.
Amen. That's a great perspective. And I'm so happy for your success. It's awesome. You're a great inspiration.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
Now, who's been a big inspiration to you, Seneca? You know, your mom, has she been a big influence on you and how much you pushed yourself to play the sport that you love?
Absolutely. My mom was always my rock, definitely. And so she was one of the big driving forces for me. I had a great mentor and a man named Donald Northcross. It was a big program in Sacramento called the OK program that helped with my development as a young man. So that was huge because back then the incarceration rate for Black males was high growing up in the late 90s or early 90s in Sacramento or throughout our country. So this program allowed me to have a resource that on the weekends that would help me with my studies, help me with brotherhood, just hanging around my friends. My circle was really tight, so it allowed me to stay focused on what I needed to do. And then also, parents and just family, having two older brothers who just allowed me to be me. They allowed me to, just to go out and be a young man, because obviously there's a huge age gap between my two brothers.
Right.
My oldest is 54, my other brother's 52. So, and I'm 41. So it was kind of like growing up as a lonely child, but at the same time, I looked up to my brothers. And so, my family was my rock for sure.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah. So tell us about your draft experience, your draft process, being with your family, waiting for your name to be called. You got drafted in 2003, round 4, pick 110 by the Seattle Seahawks, 12th man. That's tough place to play in. But what was it like waiting for your name to be called? And once you got your name called by Seattle, how grateful were you that you got to your goal, you worked hard in junior college and college, and you got better, prepared yourselves, and for this opportunity, and you got your opportunity?
Well, the process wasn't the easiest process, right? Because obviously I go back and I talk about how most teams wanted me to play a different position. We start with the Senior Bowl. I remember being at the Senior Bowl, and I was there with Kyle Bowler, Byron Leftwich. That was the very first thing that I wanted to accomplish, was being able to play in an all-star game coming out of college. I grew up in California. I grew up going to the East-West Shrine Bowl with the OK program, which was held down in East Palo Alto at Stanford. So we would go down every year growing up and watch this game. I remember watching Tommy Frazier in the East-West Shrine game. And so those were the big bowl games that you wanted to play in post-career, post-college career.
Yeah.
And I grew up always wanting to play in it.
Right.
And so when I got that opportunity in 2003 to play in it, I got picked to play at every bowl game that there was. I mean, obviously back then, I think it was the Senior Bowl and the East-West was only 2 bowls. I think in 2003, they probably had 4 or 5 different ones. So I picked the Senior Bowl. Senior Bowl was probably the biggest one that you should go play in. And when I went and played in Mobile, I still remember that there was probably a handful of teams that still wanted me to work out and run routes after practice.
Right.
And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a quarterback. So sticking to my guns, first and foremost, was the biggest thing for me. Just knowing that my ability and what I developed up to that point, I felt like I should be able to get an opportunity to play in the National Football League. Right. Mike Vick was drafted in front the year before to the Atlanta Falcons. We had grew up watching Cordell Stewart playing in the game. And obviously he was called Slash back then. And so they still didn't really identify with quarterbacks like myself. Was I Mike Vick? I would call myself a Mike Vick. Was I more of was a different type of passer than Mike Vick was? Mike Vick was explosive out of this world, explosive. But we were 2 different type of quarterbacks in a sense, even though, yes, we did run around. We could, extend plays using our legs, but I felt like I was maybe a more polished quarterback a little bit. So, to get that opportunity and going through that process from the Senior Bowl to the Combine, and people still writing articles about you saying, oh, he won't be able to play at this level. Right. I remember Charlie Casserly, who's still around, wrote a big article about why I wouldn't be able to play at the National Football League level. And, to stick to my guns was the biggest thing that I wanted to do, just because I knew that's what I worked so hard to be, was a quarterback. And that's what I wanted to play. So sitting on my couch in 2003 at my brother's house and seeing the first round go through, the first day go through, and back then it was 1, 2, and 3. 3 rounds. And I remember I was right at that cusp by maybe potentially getting drafted to Tampa Bay. I had met with John Gruden, and there was a possibility that he could take me in the 3rd round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so came down to the last pick of the 3rd round, and they took Chris Sims. Chris Sims got picked before me, and then I was the following pick 10 picks later in the 4th round.
Right.
And I remember, that following day, Mike Holmgren called me and told me the biggest thing. He said, look, you're coming here to Seattle, and we're drafting you as quarterback. You're not going to play any other position, but you're going to have to work your tail off to play this quarterback position. And so from that day forth, I mean, obviously I spent 7 years in Seattle, great years in Seattle, 3 contracts extensions with them. And, I'm forever grateful for Mike for drafting me and giving me the opportunity to be there as long as I was.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. I want to go back to the Senior Bowl. I'm a feeler. I truly believe when we feel, we can express our emotion, then others can relate and we can be that example. So I just want to know how it felt when you have grown up watching this and having your pick, just the excitement or the feeling when you could make your pick and then you could show up and you could really play. And then,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, so how did that feel?
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I said, I grew up watching the East-West Shrine Bowl, and that was just one thing that really just kind of just stood out to me. I'm like, look, man, these are the dudes that I just sat here watching in college all year long. And I was a huge Tommy Frazier fan. And the same year, I think Eddie George came out with Tommy Frazier. Yeah. I can't remember who else, but to be able to see that, I'm like, man, this is the ultimate. Like, it was so dope to me. I mean, I grew up in all-star games in Sacramento in high school, and we used to call it the Optimist. And, it was the best players in the Sacramento area. Yeah, I played in that, but it didn't compare to when you're growing up and you're watching these dudes on TV, and now you're sitting there watching them. Yeah, I also grew up I maybe caught 1 or 2 NFL games, Niner games. And what was crazy, my first NFL game was against the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. That was my first NFL game. So how crazy does the universe work that I end up getting drafted to the Seattle Seahawks and playing against the Niners? So, that's awesome. But for me to be able to see those guys and then to be able to have the opportunity to actually play in that same bowl, it meant the world to me. Yeah, I turned it down because it was more important for me to play in the Senior Bowl at the time because there was more exposure then, and all the scouts were going to be there to be able to see me practice for that week. So, but for me to have that opportunity to be able to sit there and turn it down and to be able to play in the Senior Bowl, it still meant a lot to me.
That's incredible. The bowl games are the best.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Especially, because it's exactly.
Okay. So Seneca, what was it like playing under Mike Holmgren? You and Matt played to get with each other, Matt Hasselbeck, now in the Ring of Honor. Oh, yeah. Now take me through, what was it like playing under Mike Holmgren, and what was his philosophy? What was he like in general?
Oh man, Mike was the hardest quarterback coach and head coach I ever played for. But I say that with all respect because he developed his quarterbacks. He did things and made his quarterbacks do things that I think helped us be better men, helped us be a better quarterback on Sundays. And so it was hard. It was a grind. It was a grind for me because, and also for Hasselbeck, that's like my brother. I spent 7 years with him, and we went through the same issues, having to understand how to develop to be a National Football League quarterback under Mike Holmgren's system. He was a very systematic quarterback coach, an offensive coordinator. He wanted things ran his way and his way only, which I respected back then. And so, there was things that he made us do that when you would talk to maybe other quarterbacks on other teams, they're like, wow, really? He wouldn't tell you the whole formation. No, he wouldn't tell you the whole formation. He would only give you bits and pieces of the play call, and then you had to decipher in your head what the formation was. But for people listening right now, they're like, what are you talking about?
That's kind of cool though.
For example, story is this. When he was in Green Bay and he was coaching Brett Favre, the headsets went out. When the headsets went out, Brett Favre didn't know what to call because he didn't memorize the formations. He didn't memorize the play calls. So back then, a regular West Coast play would have been like green right 92 lead. All right. Or green right Fox 2 X and Y hook. Brett Favre couldn't remember a regular base play call like that when the headsets went out. So what did he have to do? He had to burn a timeout. Mike Holmgren didn't like it. So from that point on, he said, look, you guys are going to remember the actual play call. So, for example, I go back to green right Fox 2 XY hook. The only thing that we would hear in our headset from Mike, fast forward and 10 years later, 15 years later, is Mike would just say, hey, I want Fox 2 XY hook. That's all he would tell you. You would have to know that it's green right, which is the formation, Fox 2 XY hook. And that's a very easy formation to remember. But when you start getting into the more difficult ones, you shift the chains left slot, sprint right, GU corner, halfback flat. That's a play call. But the only thing he would tell you is I want sprint right, GU corner. That's all he would tell you. So it was very difficult. It was a lot of muscle memory. It was a lot of training during the week, but it allowed you to be, to me, a better quarterback on Sundays. It helped you stay focused on the game, helped you stay focused on attention to detail, down and distance, all the different pieces that go along with playing quarterback.
Wow. That's incredible. That's like coding.
Yeah.
It's like coding and brevity and strategic. And I imagine it made you a better quarterback coach.
Absolutely. I mean, because the detail was there. I mean, that was one thing that Mike really harped on. He put a lot on his quarterbacks. That's why he had successful ones. He said, if I coach Joe Montana and Steve Young and they could do it, or Brett Favre, but these Hall of Famers, everybody else could do it. And so it was a lot of muscle memory. It was a lot of work in the brain. It started on Wednesdays when you got your playbook because those formations would change week to week. So it was very difficult.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That was a great question, Tommy.
Yeah. I just learned something today about Coach Mike, man. That's something I didn't know about that. So that I
didn't know that either.
Yeah. That's crazy.
I mean, it's probably painful to learn and experience, like you said, all the muscle memory, but it's kind of awesome.
It is. I mean, it just, somebody asked me about a week or two ago is, what was your game situation preparation? Like, what did you do before games? And I literally would tell them, like, look, we would have a play call sheet that would have like our first 15 on it. So just imagine this would have 15 plays on it that you're going to actually go out if you get the ball first and you're going to execute those first 15 plays. Literally, me and Matt will be sitting there quizzing each other on the formations.
Wow.
Because why? Mike wouldn't give you the formations. Now, we might have on that play call sheet that those head coaches or offensive coordinators hold up in front of their face. There's a lot of stuff on there, right? So when you're watching games this weekend, look and see all that stuff that's on that piece of paper. And it's front and back. At the end of the day, back then when we played, Mike would not give you any of the, you would have to know almost everything that's on that sheet in and out. So it was incredible to know that we would actually know every single formation on that play call sheet. So we would already know, if it was 2nd and 8 and he called out the personnel group, we already knew what the formation was going to be, and it allowed us to play a lot faster on Sundays. So it was a gift and a curse. It was hard, but it also allowed you to be, you were so detailed. You understood in and out about the game plan and what you guys are going to try to execute that it just made the game it slowed the game down in a sense a little bit when you played on game day.
Interesting.
That's a commanding officer running a ship. That's incredible.
That is interesting. Sure.
Respect.
Yeah. So tell our fans, what was it like playing for Seattle for 7 years? And obviously the fan base, one of the best fan bases in football, 12th man, obviously, and tough place to play. And for you, obviously you got to play with Matt Hasselbeck. But if you look at the rest of the roster, we had Ken Hamlin and Walter Jones on our show. And we also had Marcus Trufant. And what was it like seeing 2 Hall of Famers on your offensive line, Steve Hutchinson, Walter Jones? And if you look at the defense, Sean Alexander, I can't forget about one of the best running backs in the league.
He gets so excited.
I can go down the list. So just tell us about the rich tradition in Seattle.
Well, I mean, I think that tradition was already set prior to the Mike Holmgren era, I guess I would say. The Dave Craigs of the world, the Steve Largents of the world, the Jim Zorns of the world, Cortez Kennedy, those guys kind of set the foundation in a sense. And so I think once we got there, it's like anything else, I mean, obviously Pete Carroll took it to a whole nother level. But with our group of guys that we had, there was a vision that was set by Mike Holmgren. And, he brought that West Coast type of terminology and that West Coast attitude to Seattle, to the Pacific Northwest. And with the players that were assembled there, it was our job to execute that.
Yeah.
And, when he brought in Mike or Matt the year before I got there with him and Trent Dilfer, there was still no identity set yet, right? There was no identity from the quarterback position. Matt had been cut 2 or 3 times in Green Bay before he actually got an opportunity to stick it out with Green Bay. And so it was Matt's first time being in Seattle to be the full-time starter. Now, they had some bumps in the road the first year with him and Trent trying to really figure out who was going to be the guy. But the other pieces were starting to be built around them. Corn Robinson being drafted, Darrell Jackson, Bobby Ingram. Yeah, we talk about Steve Hutchinson being drafted, Chris Gray, Robbie Tobeck, Walter Jones. And then once we finally, just like anything else, it took time for Mike to kind of build his system and his players and put them in place.
Right.
Once we got that, that's when everything started to roll. They gave up Amon Green to bring in Sean Alexander, right? And so there was a lot of pieces. Jeremy Stevens at tight end, drafted him from UW. And once we got all those pieces in place, things started to roll offensively. You take on the identity of your head coach, and he was an offensive-minded head coach. Would I say our defense kind of stacked up there to the defenses that Pete Carroll put together? Absolutely not. The Legion of Boom, and I think Marcus and everybody else would say, was probably better than the defense that we had when we were there. Just from a standpoint of the way they performed and the way their structure was on defense and the things that they allow their players to do was a lot different than the way we play. But we still had some bona fide players on defense. You had Ken Hamlin, who was, bringing the wood back there at safety. You had Marcus, of course, who was a homegrown kid who was drafted in the first round. And Marcus was a hell of a player, still a good friend of mine to this day. We had good pieces. We had great pieces, but the energy level was totally different defensively when Pete Carroll had that Legion of Boom put together. But offensively, our powerhouse and having those Hall of Famers up front, there will never be another group of guys like that up front, like Robbie Tobeck, Steve Hutchinson, Chris Gray, Walter Jones. We had Sean Locklear, who was put in at right tackle, who was drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round. Chris Terry was our right tackle. I remember all these names. And but we had a hell of a group, man. We had a big group of guys offensively that we could move the ball. And when we had it rolling, it was hard for any team to stop us.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Seneca, tell us, what was your greatest experience in the NFL? Was it when you first stepped on? Was it a great play?
Yes, that's a great question. I have a lot of moments. I mean, obviously being a guy who was kind of, a backup most of the years in Seattle, had his opportunities to play, but still played in some games, played in some huge games. Every game is huge in the National Football League, right? But to be part of moments, I think I still maybe hold a record for the longest play from scrimmage in Seattle against the Philadelphia Eagles, your Eagles. First play out the gate. I see it.
Oh, and it's Daryl too. It's Daryl. It's 81.
Oh, good.
Is it? Oh, okay. Okay. No, but the very first play out the gate, we ran a slant and go on. I think it was on Lito Shepherd on the left side. We ran a slant and go double move, went 98 yards out the gate to Corn Robinson. And I think it still holds up maybe as the longest play from scrimmage in Seahawks history. Being part of the championship game, having a big catch in the championship game where I caught a pass for 30 some odd yards. We go on to score, and then the route was on against Carolina. Being part of big passing games for myself. I had big games where I threw for 3 touchdowns against the New England Patriots, going on the road, playing down in San Francisco, being able to beat a team that you grew up idolizing, beating the San Francisco 49ers. I beat the Raiders on Monday night in my first start at home on national television. Cool. So that was cool. So there was a lot of big moments that I was part of. And so, you cherish all those moments because you can't take every moment for granted when you're playing in the league. And so all those moments mean a lot to me.
That wasn't like playing. That what was it like playing at? No, you're good. Now, what was it like playing at Quest Field? Now Century then Lumen. What was it like playing at Quest Field in that 2005 NFC Championship game against Carolina?
Man,
how inspirational was that?
Bananas, man. I mean, you got to think about, they had never had anything or a moment like that in the history of Seattle. And for us to be able to be playing in a championship game at home and to have the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl for the first time ever in the history of the franchise, the energy in that stadium was crazy, absolutely crazy. So that's why, to be able to experience that's why every moment was totally different. Yeah, I could talk about the play that I made. I could talk about the post game with the confetti coming down and being on the other side of it because, a couple weeks later, we end up losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl, right? And then now you have to see all the, the gold and black or whatever confetti coming down because they won. But playing there at Quest back then, man, it was bananas. I mean, I know it got on a whole nother level when Pete Carroll took over and all that energy in the city and the energy in that stadium. But for us during that time, it was great. And we fed off of it. We had a game against the New York Giants that I think they had like 11 false starts just because they couldn't hear. And it was bananas. It was a great time to be a Seahawk during that time.
Wow. Yeah. So this is a question I always like to ask former athletes, and obviously you got to spend time with a lot of the different teams throughout your career. So for you, how tough is it for you and your family moving from team to team? But you got to play with great quarterbacks like Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Colin Kaepernick, Jake Delhomme. So just tell us about the experience by moving from team to team. But on the positive side, you got to play with other great players too.
Right. It was different. I mean, for me, the process, being able to be in Seattle for 7 years was huge. I didn't have to move, didn't have to do anything as far as that standpoint goes. It was me and Hasselbeck. And yes, they would always bring in other quarterbacks to compete, right? But it was my job in the offseason to prepare mentally and physically to go out and compete to whoever they brought in. So from that standpoint, being able to be in one franchise for 7 years was huge because I got to see a lot of different things. I got to see people come in and how their transition was coming into our team. And also I saw people leave. And I being in a place for that long, you see people come and go.
Yeah.
And so being able to see that and only knowing Seattle for 7 years and then getting traded to Cleveland, the grass ain't always greener on the other side. And, when you go to Cleveland, I was there with Jake Delhomme. Mike traded for me and said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to be the starter here. But the transition with our family moving at that point was good because why? I had spent 7 years there. I had, we got to the top of the peak being able to play in the National Football League in the Super Bowl, divisional championship games, divisional winners. And so being able to start over, going to Cleveland and actually realizing how historic that franchise is and the things that they had to go through was totally different. Now the move was different because that was the first time we're like, all right, well, let's move. Let's stay in the city. So we got to stay in the city of Cleveland, which was totally different. This is right after the recession, and it hit Cleveland hard, really hard. So that was a big transition for us. But I got a lot of great friends moving to Cleveland. Came out with a lot of good people that I met in every stage of my life, just like I said, the development of my life as a quarterback, it's even just as great when you talk about just the people that you meet along this journey of being in the National Football League. I met some really good Christians. Ben Watson is where I met him in Cleveland, and he's a leader of man. Reggie Hodges. I met a lot of great people when I got to Cleveland. Was it the outcome that I dreamed of? Probably not. But at the end of the day, it came out with some really good people. And you say I got these opportunities to be around Drew Brees. Yes, I signed with the New Orleans Saints after a crazy whirlwind of trying to figure out where I was going to be. It was either going to be Oakland or New Orleans. I ended up signing with New Orleans. Being around Drew Brees, I learned a lot of different things about just his competitiveness and how he competes and the things he does on the practice field. That's where he wins his ball games, is in practice. He goes balls to the wall in practice and makes the game a lot easier for him on game days. And I respected him and as far as his work ethic goes when I was with him in New Orleans. And from there, I don't even count San Francisco. That's a whole nother podcast that we'll talk about even later. But I was in San Francisco for a short stint, and then end up signing with Green Bay. And then Green Bay was very close to being ran like Seattle was. Right. So I kind of felt somewhat back at home. Ted Thompson, man, rest in peace, was the GM. He drafted me in when I was in Seattle, and he gave me the opportunity to go to Green Bay and play. Now, that outcome was totally different, and I talk about this with on other podcasts and talking about the whole Aaron Rodgers deal. Yeah, the most gifted quarterback I ever was around. The most gifted quarterback I was ever around. And when I say gifted, I'm just talking about the mental part of it and the physical, and not just per se just being able to run and just being athletic, but just gifted, being able to throw from different platforms, the arm strength that he has and the different things that he can do with the ball was super gifted. And so, but at that point in my career with me and my wife, when we got to Green Bay, it was kind of like a decompressed moment for us, being able to be in Green Bay. There's nothing there. It was just me and the wife. It's like, all right, let's enjoy our time here in Green Bay. And not knowing that Aaron was going to break his collarbone week 9. And I had literally just signed week 1. So I still don't even know coaches' names barely on defense. And he breaks his collarbone. I have to go in and play against Chicago, finish that off. And then I got hurt again with the second time with this injury against Philadelphia.
Oh my God.
I ended up I tore my adductor for the second time. Ooh. And when I did that, that pretty much kind of solidified my ride and my journey in the National Football League.
Wow.
Wow. What a story. What a story. Seneca, what was your favorite place to play?
Ooh, my favorite place.
And it's I'm going to tie it in. Did it have fellowship for
Ooh,
you?
Yeah, of course. Fellowship. Absolutely. It's Cleveland, hands down. I mean, just because it brought me closer to God, of course, even though that I was already close as a believer and a Christian, but it brought me even closer just because of Ben Watson and the people that I was around. Ben Watson, and to become a better husband. At the time, I wasn't married, but I also was able to kind of see what it looked like because I grew up in I wouldn't say a dysfunctional household, but my parents were separated and everything else. So I didn't really identify on what it really looked like to be a husband or to be in a marriage. And I saw that with the people that I was around when I got to Cleveland. So there was also, like I said, there was some good that came out of Cleveland. A lot of great times that I spent with the players that were there during that time. But I also don't want to forget, also being in Green Bay. I think Green Bay is such a historic place to play, has a lot of history. And for me to be the first African-American quarterback to start a game in Green Bay history against Philadelphia Eagles, you got to go and check the history books. Yeah, to start an actual real regular season game, I was the first Black quarterback to ever start a game in a historic franchise. So that was another moment leading up to that game against Philadelphia. I thought we talked more about that then we talked about me just being able to be the starter there in Green Bay and
Seneca,
have the
what
backup
year was
around
that?
us.
What
It
year
was 2013-14 season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. First black quarterback to ever start. And that was in 2013. And go ahead.
I'm just curious because to piggy off that, I'm just surprised that no one talks about his this important stuff. And for all they talk about, like people making the start when people get injured. They don't talk about like what you just said, the first African-American quarterback to start their game for a historic franchise. I don't know why people don't talk about that on shows. All they talk about is
you're going to talk about it, Nathan.
People starting. Yeah, but it's just crazy. But
yeah, no, the first black quarterback to start, man, and that meant a lot to me. You know, just to be in the history books for that historic franchise. And you got to think about it. Up to that point, the only two starters they had, because obviously Brett Favre was healthy for 250 games straight or whatever the case may be. So for 17 years, they had one quarterback, and then Aaron Rodgers comes in. And at that point, he was in year 6 or whatever the case was. And so they had never seen another quarterback in almost 25 years other than Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. So for me to be able to get that start and be the first black quarterback to start, that really meant a lot to me. Now, it was unfortunately that, I ended up getting hurt and didn't get to finish the game off. But, I got the injury in New Orleans, and the doctors told me there was a big possibility that I could re-injure it again. And I absolutely did the exact same move I did in training camp in New Orleans and ended up popping my adductor again. And after that, it was over.
I'm so sorry you experienced that, but I'm so happy that you experienced the role of being the first African-American quarterback for Cleveland. That is amazing. So my best friend's father up the street was a preacher for the Eagles. So he was there, and he would mentor and have fellowship with Randall Cunningham and Reggie White. And so I'm going to tell him this story, and he's going to be so excited to hear that.
You got to.
Yes. Your achievement, and that I had this opportunity to share this space with you. It's so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Now take me through your Green Bay games, Seneca. You guys in Seattle had Green Bay games left and right. Those are probably the most memorable games ever in Seattle history. The snow game you guys had a couple years ago. So take me through, what was it like playing at Lambeau in the snow with the Seahawks against Green Bay?
Yeah, man, we had a lot of memories, man. I mean, going on the road and playing them in the playoffs, obviously you think about, Matt Hasselbeck saying, we want the ball, we're going to score on the coin toss in overtime, which Brett Favre was trying his best to give us that game away. Literally was trying to, he threw probably 2 or 3 picks, costly picks, and we didn't capitalize on it. But in overtime, Matt Hasselbeck opened his mouth and said, we want the ball, we're going to score. And God came back to bite us. He don't like ugly, I guess, and so he tried to throw a hitch on a team that obviously knew our signals. They knew our play calls for the most part, because you're throwing it against Al Harris. And it was nobody's, you can't really point the finger. We tried to point the finger at Alex Bannister, saying, oh, well, he ran his hitch and he kind of drifted away from the ball. But at the same time, we shouldn't have made the check, or Matt shouldn't have made the check. Ball was on the right hash. He's throwing a hitch all the way to the left side of the field, changing it at the line of scrimmage. Al Harris knows our signals because we ran the same stuff that Green Bay ran. And he jumped the hitch and took it back to the house, and it was a walk-off touchdown in the playoffs. So, but obviously, too, playing in another playoff game in the snow there, I was playing receiver, and I was coming in. I was had a couple plays in the playoff run there in Green Bay, but we always had to go to Lambeau. I think out of all the historic stadiums in the NFL, I think I played in Lambeau probably the most as an opponent coming in there. I think I played 6 or 7 times. So we played there a lot throughout my career. And it was fun, man. I mean, it's a small community with this huge, gigantic stadium sitting right in the middle of the community. And I mean, it's an experience that every person, if you got the opportunity to go to Lambeau to check a game out, which is very hard to get tickets, because you can't get tickets, period, because they give them away to the people in Wisconsin, and it's a generationally passed down of tickets that have to be passed down to family members and everything else. So but it's a great scene and it's a great place to play.
Wow. Yeah. So
New goal going.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is speaking of Al Harris, we're lucky to have him on the Dallas staff now. So
Yeah, he's on the staff, and Al's a good dude, man. I mean, what he's doing with Diggs and developing him, and right now, what Diggs is leading the NFL with 9 or 10 picks or whatever he has. Record's 14, so he has an opportunity with a lot of football left to maybe pass that and beat that record.
Yeah. So this is a 2-part question. So for you, obviously, after your NFL career, now you're a coach, and obviously, how grateful are you to be in this position to be able to play the game you love, and now to coach the game in a different aspect? And for example, when you got to the Dallas job, take us through that experience. How did that come about? And what was when you got into the locker room and when you met Dak Prescott for the first time, did he remind you of yourself a little bit?
Yeah, there's, the process, I think, to the first question is, once you get that opportunity as a player to see the other side of the game, you have a different aspect on it. You understand why coaches said the things that they would say, why they would poke and pry at you, or why they would get upset by the little things. You kind of understand it now, because obviously you spend as a coach all this time developing and putting together a game plan and actually watching so much film that you're trying to put all your players in position to make plays. And, it's their job to go out and execute it. It's you as a teacher or as a coach to put these things together and to make it as simple as possible, but also to not overthink the process, to try to get your players in position to make plays. And then when they do, or when they don't, you actually understand why coaches get upset. You actually understand why they're so excited, because now you just do a touchdown in the red zone, because the time that coaches put in that building on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you actually get to see that put out there on the field on Sundays, Thursdays, or Mondays. So you just get a different view from and a different respect for coaching, because it's a lot of time that we have to put in to be able to win ball games on Sundays. But the other part of it is obviously, yes, when I walked into the building, to be able to see these players, for me, it was like somewhat closure for me. Right. Because obviously my career in Green Bay didn't end the way I wanted it to end. Did I feel like I had some more years left? Yes, I did. But at the time, I was up in age. I was a little bit older. There was a lot of new kids coming into the league now, where financially they were a lot cheaper than I would have been, because I was invested. I was in the league for 10 plus years at the time. So it was different. So for me, last year was kind of somewhat like closure. I'm back in the league. I'm back around the gang. I'm back around the players again. And I can actually be on the sideline again and be part of the National Football League again. So it was fun. Yes, that did definitely remind me of myself, obviously just a bigger version of myself. He's a bigger guy than what people kind of see on TV, right? I mean, he sits at around 6'1.5", 6'2", and plays around 225, 230. So he's a big physical guy. And just to be able to see how they operate, being able to see how Kellen kind of puts together a game plan, the technology now that plays a big factor in this, right? We're sitting here talking on Zoom, right? Years ago, back when I was playing in the National Football League, this didn't exist, where you can communicate with other people on Zoom. So technology is so much further advanced than when it was when I played. So to be able to see how that piece plays in developing your game plan and things like that was huge. So I loved being around the guys last year. I love being back in the locker room, being around the staff. And, obviously it was a Green Bay staff somewhat put together. That's the reason why I got the opportunity to be back in the building last year.
Man, what a great opportunity for you. Obviously, Mike McCarthy. And then obviously Scott Tolzien was there last year too. So what a great opportunity.
Scott Scoots is what we called him. So Scott Tolzien was my backup. That was a name that me and I guess Aaron came up with. We used to just call him Scoots, but he he is on the staff with Green Bay. He kind of works as Mike McCarthy's assistant, and me and him got to spend a lot of time together last year. And right now they're playing some good ball. I mean, last year we missed Dak. Unfortunately, he got hurt. Right. We missed a really good solid with Mike Nolan. I don't know if he was ready to be the defensive coordinator. Let me just say that last year. But with Dak being back,
yep,
and the new D coordinator there, it's changed the trajectory of the legend per se of what Mike McCarthy is going to leave behind, because without those two people, it's very hard for the Dallas Cowboys to move forward, and getting those two pieces back,
yep.
New D coordinator with Dan Quinn and Dak being back there, I think is just going to help solidify what Mike McCarthy's about as a head coach.
Well, it's so exciting to hear all the celebratory moments, but there's such a commitment that goes into being a professional in the NFL like yourself. You were there for such a long period of time. I think we'd all really enjoy hearing about your greatest give, your greatest sacrifice for your greatest get, and then also what was your key to balance along the way.
Yeah, I think being humble throughout the process. I think that was one of the biggest things for me is just being humble, understanding none of this is given to me. God is leading me throughout this journey of life. So I think being humble and just understanding that there's a lot of other people out there that maybe have more talent than I do, have more speed than I do, have more arm strength than I do, have greater muscle memory than I do, that weren't given the opportunity to make it. There was a lot of people that came before me that didn't get the opportunity to play 10 plus years in the National Football League. So just understanding that, I was given an opportunity that I had to take forth and take advantage of. And so I was very respectful of that, and just understanding that the fact that there was a lot of people that came before me to open doors to give me this opportunity to play.
That's amazing. And what do you think was your greatest sacrifice and greatest win?
My greatest sacrifice and greatest win. I think that my greatest sacrifice is just probably my time. We can't get time back. You got to sacrifice a lot of your time. You got to sacrifice. I think even for me, I would have loved if I would have came in the league with children and a family for them to experience what Daddy did. But I think it's more important for me to be now where I'm at in this space, to be able to sacrifice being home and being around my kids, being able to have the ability to take them to school, pick them up from school, and see all these different moments that when you're sacrificing going through the process of playing in the league, you don't have that time. You got to be in the building early and you're out late as a quarterback. So my greatest sacrifice is giving up my time and missing a lot of moments during that time, right? But it gave me the opportunity now where I'm at to be able to be home and to be around my family.
I love it. That's so special.
Now, what's it like bringing back the game you love to, your high school coach now? What's it like bringing back the game you love and sharing, to the kids and what you learned and how much you've grown for them, Well,
you know what? It's difficult. I ain't gonna lie, especially when you're coaching at a private school where you don't have the kids that have the IQ, or maybe my expectations might be too high for the kids that I'm coaching, right? I talk about the 3 C's. You got to be competent, number one. We all got to be competent to do our jobs. We got to be competent in understanding what franchise development looks like. I got to be competent in understanding what P&Ls look like. I got to be competent in all these different aspects. I had to be competent when I played to understand a playbook. That competency is going to lead to me being more confident to do my job.
Yeah.
So if my kids don't understand the playbook, they're not going to be very confident to go out and run the routes that they need to run or get to the proper depths that they got to get to, right? And then ultimately, it's going to lead to them being more comfortable to do their job on the football field. Now they're just reacting and they're playing football. So those 3 C's are hugely, hugely important in understanding how to play a game at a high level, how to operate a business. I learned it from my right-hand man, my operator. You got to understand the 3 C's, because I think competency is hugely important in any field that you're in. You got to understand the ins and outs of your business. You got to understand the ins and outs of the playbook. and it's going to allow you to be more confident on the football field. That's why the way Mike Holmgren developed us, it allowed us to be more confident on the football field, because now we're just out there reacting. Yeah, we got an overload. We're going to make the proper call and then play football, and everything else out there is football, and then you're more comfortable doing your job when you're out there on Sunday. So that was one thing, the 3 C's that I try to instill in my kids. But first and foremost, you got to have football players. If you don't have football players, it's very, very difficult to win ball games, especially at a small private school.
Mm-hmm. So before we get to the last 2 things, I want to give a big shout out to one of our listeners. His name is Bill Dean. I'm sure you recognize him. He has a picture with you. He's a big Seahawks fan, and he's a mental health coach. Actually, I had him on the show I think a couple months back, and he's listening in right now, and he said this is a great interview, and he wanted to give a shout out, and so shout out to him, and like I said, he has a picture with you. I don't know if you remember him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bill Dean.
Yeah, Bill Dean.
Bill, what's up, baby, man? Appreciate you listening in on this podcast early in the morning, because if you're in Seattle, I respect it, because right now, what is it, 8 o'clock?
It's 8:07.
Yeah, you had to get up at 7:30 to listen to this podcast. So I appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, so the last 2 things here, our team is part of this foundation. It's called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. Obviously, you know him. He's a former NFL coach. Now he's the offensive coordinator at Tennessee State with Eddie George. And we're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community stays safe, the kids stay safe. So we'll send it to you and your wife so you can check it out.
Absolutely. Please do. Please do.
And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and all the essential workers right now?
Man, absolutely, man. I mean, I think this year has been, or year and a half, and since COVID started, has been crazy. My wife is a registered nurse. She worked when she was in Seattle at Children's Hospital. My in-laws, they're all nurses. They come from the state of Iowa, where I believe in the state of Iowa, that's all everybody wants to do is be a nurse.
Yeah.
So I respect the fact that first and foremost, that they want to give up their time and sacrifice what they do to be able to help others. And I think that's hugely, hugely important. I think over the last year and a half, when we had to deal with COVID, I think it just speaks volume to those people who want to sacrifice being able to step in, knowing that they're putting their lives on the line as well, right? To potentially catching COVID and getting sick. And so, I respect those who want to give up their time and their energy and the things that they're about to help others. And so I just definitely want to say thank you to them, because they allowed us to get through this trying time that we were in over the last year and a half. And without their support and their energy, first and foremost, because I see it each and every day from my sister-in-law, and she works in the front lines, and she would come home and tell us all the time about people being on ECMO and all these different things. And so to be able to see the wherewithal and the mental fortitude and stuff that they had to go through and actually see, and to be able to go back and do that again and again and again over the last year and a half means a lot. So we just want to say thank you to them.
Yeah, well said over there. And we just want to thank you, your wife, and your family for the service. And obviously they deserve a pay raise for sure. All these nurses, doctors, essential workers deserve a pay raise. And I'm truly grateful to have to see them work hard every day for us. But there it is. That wraps up episode 937 with the legend, Seneca Wallace, former Iowa State quarterback, played in the NFL also, Seattle Seahawks, Browns, Saints, Packers, 49ers. Used to be with the Cowboys coaching staff. He owns 6 Wingstops, so go check that out.
And a hotel.
And now he coaches.
And a hotel.
And a hotel. Owns a hotel too.
I mean, come on, that's like the coolest.
Courtyard by Marriott, baby,
Yeah,
right there in Ames, Iowa.
And he's now a high school football coach. But Seneca, and by the way, and obviously, please, the most important thing, the first African-American quarterback to start a game for the Packers. So there you go. Yeah. But I just want to say thank you again for joining us. This is truly an honor. What a great story, Seneca. And hopefully we can get you back on the show at some point down the line so you can meet the full team. But like I said, keep up the great work. And I'm going to go visit a Wingstop pretty soon. I'll let you know when I visit that. But thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. It was an honor. You guys are doing a great job with the podcast. Keep it up. And the things that you're helping out with Hugh Jackson and all the different stuff that you guys got going on. I appreciate it. So yeah, I see the beast mode in the back there, Lit. So I see it with the Seattle Seahawks country, man. So keep supporting them Seahawks, baby. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Seneca. Blessings over
Thank
you and
you.
your
Thank you.
family. This is awesome.
Same to you, Kia. Thank you.
Appreciate
Happy
it.
holidays too, man.
Happy
You guys have a
holidays.
happy
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.